Hi everyone, my name is Maxime Duimeling and I would like to welcome you to our today's podcast about equal pay. And therefore, I have invited two experts in the field, namely Vera Claes from Zijkant and my colleague Bart van de Bussche. Before we start, I suggest that Bart, Vera, that you give a short introduction about yourself.
Yes, perhaps ladies first. Vera, I will give first the word to you.
Thank you, Bart. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Vera Claes. I'm Secretary General of Zijkant, the Progressive Women's Movement. I'm also member of the board of the Belgian Institute for the Equality of Women and Men. We at Zijkant organize since 2005 the yearly Equal Pay Day, the day in the year when women earn as much as men. Our original campaign videos won several prizes at national and international communication festivals. And I invite you to take a look at our new video, which is on equalpayday.be.
Thank you, Vera. Myself, I'm Bart van den Bussche. I'm director at PwC. And me and my team, we work mainly on reward and personal income tax questions from our clients. But I'm also the driver of our service offering in the field of equal pay certification. So I think we have there a joint commonality where we are happy to share our expertise on.
Okay, thank you, Vera and Bart. So I suggest that we start. So last week we had our equal pay event in Brussels, and next week on November the 15th we have the Unequal Pay Day of the European Commission. So a lot of events are taking place. So I would think in 2022 equal pay is obvious. Vera, can you perhaps comment on this?
Yes, sure. Well, unfortunately, unequal pay between men and women is still a reality today. At European level, the gender pay gap is still at 13%, which means that women work, in fact, for free, as we say, as of the 15th of November until the end of this year. Belgium scores better than the average of the European Union. We're glad with that, but pay differences still exist in our country as well.
Indeed, and I think I can add on that. Concretely, women and men usually start a career without difference in pay. Often in Belgium as well, we have systems like function classification who helps overcome this. But when you look back to the entire career, the gap seems to appear. So you need to differentiate between, on the one hand, pay inequality and the gender pay gap, as there are two different measures of pay discrepancies. Pay inequality is actually a situation where somebody is paid less for the same job or a job of an equal value. And there is, in other words, no objective factor that can explain the difference in pay. So that can be actually a discrimination based on gender, but as well on other grounds that are, for instance, protected by law, for example, religion, sexual orientation, etc. So employers can only pay differently, to put it in other words, to workers doing the same work or equal value on the basis of an objective, gender-neutral and bias-free criteria, such as, for instance, performance or competence. So apart from the pay gap, apart from pay inequality, we also have the gender pay gap. And the gender pay gap actually illustrates another problem. It is usually expressed as a comparison between the average earning of a man and the average earning of a woman across all roles. So sometimes the comparison is expressed based on the median, and they are actually in practice different methodologies. And that's why you may find different figures in the press on the gender pay gap, for instance. So, but both are two separate issues, I would say, as explained.
Mm-hmm. Yes, indeed, but it's as you say. So we have to take these different calculations into account, of course, which doesn't make it easier. And recently, I was even surprised to read that the gender pay gap decreased in 2020 compared to 2019. This should be good news, but however, it isn't. It's what the statistics published by the National Social Security Office pointed out. But then when you go look closer, you realize that this trend is biased because women were hit the most by this famous health crisis we had. They are indeed active in low-paid sectors that are predominantly occupied by female workers and that suffered temporary unemployment or even layoffs. Also, it appears that no less than 71% of female workers took parental leave during the pandemic, compared to only 29% for the male workers. So, in other words, the remuneration of female workers being unemployed during the pandemic is not included in the average earnings of female workers, resulting in a better gender pay gap ratio. And also, part-time workers are not included in these statistics. But 42% of women in Belgium work part-time, often also in low-paid sectors. So these aren't included in the statistics either.
Oh, yes, Vera, that's very interesting what you are mentioning here. So, when we look at these figures, we should be very cautiously. But then, how can we ensure that we understand the gender pay gap well? And what does it mean in the end? Perhaps, Bart, can you say something about this?
Yes, certainly. I think Vera already pointed out some important elements. I think, first of all, always make sure if you want to base yourself on a gap or a figure, that you know, of course, how, for instance, in this situation, again, the pay gap has been calculated. Is it based on the average earnings? Does it take into account other statistics? Does it include part-time workers, as Vera referred to? And secondly, of course, you need to check what are the pay elements that are taken into consideration. For instance, you have, of course, the base salary, but is also the bonus included, other benefits like pension. But we know, for instance, that bonuses are also often determined as a percentage of the base pay. So that means, and also other benefits like pensions. So that means that the gap will only increase if the bias took place, for instance, when the fix was agreed on between parties. The gender pay gap is caused, as said, by various factors, part of which can be attributed to direct and indirect pay discrimination. So we see, for instance, of course, in terms of ceilings, that sometimes we see, of course, that males are typically in higher and senior positions, which are typically higher paid. Again, of course, part-time workers are predominantly female workers, but also, of course, unconscious bias, stereotypes, of course, may lead that may refrain female workers to progress at the same pace as their male counterparts, of course.
Okay, so Bart, as I understand, there is still some work to do to close the gender pay gap. What you also are saying at the beginning, that was very interesting. Women and men usually start their career without pay differences, but then the pay gap appears. How come this?
Well, I can answer that, but let me start answering this question with some good news. Women and men start their career at the same level, and even better, young women even earn more than young men. So that's good news because in general, young women are higher educated than young men. So voila, that's the good part of it. But then we see that the gap increases with the worker's age, and in particular when it's time to take care of the children. So when children arrive, yeah, well, the gap starts increasing. So even if progress is made in society to share parental responsibilities, women still take up the most of the household work and the care responsibilities. And that's what we focus on in our new video for Unequal Pay Day. That's to share the household work. So therefore we speak of a child penalty for women. Of course, it's not a penalty to get a child, but in this case, as we refer to equal pay, we can say that it's a child's penalty for women. So, and this has an impact on their wages, as maternity and parental leaves are usually not fully paid. And of course, it has an impact on the women's career progression. You also have gender biases that will have an impact on important decisions on the career paths of women and men, and of course also on their pay.
Okay, yes, Vera. It's very interesting. And also, I'm also a young mother. I'm particularly concerned about this impact of a parental responsibilities and yeah, what we can do about it. Can you perhaps share with us some best practices? For example, what we see in other countries?
Yes, I surely can. I particularly like the experience of Iceland, where they harmonized maternity and paternity leave. So each parent has 6 months there with a with a partial payment during the leave. That means that women and men are in equal position when it comes to parental responsibilities. And that's important. They get the same length of leave and the same pay treatment during that leave. It avoids that the parent earning the lower income of the household is the one who takes the leave. And this person is often the mother, and so promote better sharing of family responsibilities. In Belgium, during I just wanted to add also that in Belgium, during the first year of a baby, no less than 84% of the parental leave is taken by the mother. So this means, in fact, a standstill for her career.
No, indeed, Vera, and I was a bit too quickly, but just wanted to say that I fully agree with you, Vera. I think indeed parental responsibilities unfortunately still impact women the most, and Maxime referred as a mother, but I can say as a father of two daughters, of course, I hope truly that this will change, of course. And again, the good news is that companies are not obliged, of course, to wait for government's decision. An employer can always go beyond the legal requirements of just being compliant, but can go, of course, a step further. And there we've seen some recently in the media that some companies, like for instance Volvo Cars, AB InBev, announced or that they decided to grant, for instance, extra legal benefits to promote a friendly family working environment and combating by doing so the gender pay gap. In this system, new parents may benefit from it, provided that they are working, for instance, at least 1 year at the company, and they can have, of course, access to additional benefits. Benefits that could be, for instance, an increasing of the length of maternity and paternity leave, as we refer to, but as well it can be providing additional financial support to the parental leave by completing the payment of the health insurance funds so that the parents receive full salary, and of course allowing flexibility at the return from leave. Some companies also extend their family-friendly policy at European level, while others applied it globally, of course, which of course may have a significant impact for US workers, as of course there is a difference in social security system. Belgium will also soon transpose the directive on the protection of workers, taking parental or care leave into consideration. So it also concerns a situation where a worker takes a leave to take care of an elderly parent. So it's not only related to children that may impact, but also, for instance, if we take care for somebody else within the family. The goal in the end is, of course, to encourage male workers to take as well more leave, simplify the access to it, and protect the workers that have taken the leave, meaning that someone should not be discriminated against or disadvantaged because of the leave, regardless, of course, the gender or reason that you took that leave.
Vera, do you have some particular concerns about this directive or thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I sure do have. I hope we at Zijkant, we hope that Belgium will go further in that area by, for instance, aligning the length of the leave for both parents and eliminating in this way the financial loss during this period, meaning that the parents would get their full pay, both of them. So, and at the same time, we need more efforts to support working parents. Flexibility is one element, but flexibility is insufficient if we do not improve childcare structures and promote parental leave for both parents. So that's what we focus on from Zijkant's part.
Okay, this is already very enriching. So thank you for that. But yeah, next to these parental responsibilities, we have also the gender biases, which also has a negative impact on a woman's career. Do you have any recommendations in this area, perhaps Bart?
Sure, Maxime. Well, I think on the first hand, we also need to look at training, because if you're talking about bias, it's often an unconscious bias, and by giving people training, they can become more conscious about a certain bias that may exist and overcome them. And that's important, I think, in the entire employee's life cycle. On the other hand, it's as well important that companies look at their HR data and put systems in place to detect any potential issues. Again, that they can steer or take up or look deeper into this to intervene or repair the bias. Typical criteria that employers could look at are, for instance, how is the panel of candidates composed of, but also interviews. It's not only male. Is there a good balance, for instance, in terms of diversity? An outcome of the recruitment process. So you can, of course, monitor how many men or women are hired. What is the profile of leavers and at which point in their career, at which age that people leave? So is this typically linked, for instance, if women leave, that's after having the birth of a first child, for instance? And of course, another thing that employers can monitor is how many women are promoted compared to men, but also, of course, who participates to learning and development progress. So there's certainly a lot to monitor. And then, of course, in terms of policy and training, some elements can be resolved, luckily.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, Bart, it is not enough to measure the company gender pay gap. You also need to look at the data behind it and take action where necessary. By the way, speaking about this, is there already a gender pay gap reporting obligation in Belgium?
Not yet, but the European Commission published a proposal for a directive on binding pay transparency measures. One of the goals is a union where women can participate equally in and lead our European society. So the directive includes the obligation to inform workers on pay levels and an obligation for large companies to report the gender pay gap. Again, therefore, in the beginning of this podcast, we explained what is, of course, the difference between the gender pay gap and pay equality, of course. This way, the proposed measure will increase awareness on pay conditions within the company. And of course, through transparency and enforcement of mechanisms enabling workers and employers to tackle pay discrimination, the European Commission aims to combat on its side factors that contribute positively to resolve the existing pay gap.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very interesting, Bart, what you're saying there. And we at Zijkant, we fully support Commissioner Helena Dalli and the European Commission in their efforts to install the Pay Transparency Act. Helena Dalli was there with a video message at our conference explaining why this Pay Transparency Act is so important for everyone at every level. So yes, we really fully support it, and we hope it will be introduced as of this year, and I'm sure that the European Commissioner will focus on it, and that the European Commission will be a real ambassador, in fact, for this Pay Transparency Act. But on the other hand, I'm curious, Bart. Can you tell us how PricewaterhouseCoopers can help companies to prepare for the upcoming directive and its requirements?
Sure. So thanks for asking, Vera. So I think indeed that at PwC we will not wait till the new directive is into place to support organizations. It's already an important topic that we already address proactively. So we believe it's not. We believe it's important not to wait for the directive to take action in this area. I think there are many risks of not acting, not only reputational, but also in terms of demotivation and being an attractive employer, of course, in the context as well as the war for talent. I think, as mentioned earlier, organizations will have to report, of course, on that gender pay gap. But on top of that, the directive foresees that companies should conduct a joint pay assessment with their workers' representatives where there's a pay gap of 5%. And I think they're actually already an existing service that we are already rolled out globally is, of course, our equal salary certification process. So there typically we can help assisting clients to verify the difference in pay explained by objective factors, actually. And we start typically with a statistical analysis, but also complemented with a more extensive qualitative analysis of the company pay policies, processes, and practice. And there actually PwC also has, and also in our team, we have a broad expertise to ensure that, for instance, a job classification and grading system is, of course, implemented and also free of biases. And there, of course, an outside view helps employees in this respect.
Okay, yeah, Bart, more specifically, how can the equal salary certification help companies in complying with the requirements of the upcoming directive? Can you explain how it works?
Yeah, sure. So as said, the equal salary certification starts actually with a statistical analysis by applying a regression method based on the organization pay policy. So an important is any case with a pay gap of more than 5% or more is flagged in this first step. We call it typically internally as special cases who will be subject to further analysis during the second phase, being the qualitative analysis. Together with the HR responsible at our client, we will analyze all special cases to identify whether there or not objective factors could explain the pay difference. So something that would not be included in the regression. If not, of course, an action plan will need to be put in place to remediate the situation. We also, of course, pay attention to this during monitoring audits after the label is granted by a third party and also independent non-profit organizations. So typically, we as PwC do the analysis and provide an advice to the third party independent non-profit organization to issue that quality label. Of course, the statistical analysis can help to interpret the gender pay gap, also measured based on the directive's requirement on the one hand, and the analysis of the special cases will support discussions with the body representatives on the other hand. So there I would say we have already the experience in-house. Now, I would like to emphasize that of course, the certification itself is it's an audit, but it's actually based on continuous improvement mindset. So I think important with an holistic review of the company's pay data, policies, processes, and practice, the certification exercise offers the opportunity to understand where the company stands in terms of equality and identify areas of improvement. So I would say even if a company would fail the test and that you would not yet at the first run meet the criteria to have that certification, actually you started a process of continuous improvement because there will be follow-up audits help you to achieve a minimum standard, I would say. So in other words, how often do companies have the opportunity as an organization to have an independent party to review its HR and pay practices and have, let us say, in a constructive way, extensive feedback about it in that continuous improvement mindset?
Yes, Bert. Yeah, it's very interesting what you're saying there. Indeed, how often do you have the opportunity as an organization to have such an independent party to review your HR? So indeed, that's and to get feedback and extensive feedback on it. So that's really important, I think. To have this opportunity which PricewaterhouseCoopers offers. And yes, organizations often lack resources to perform such an assessment. But Bart, I still have another question for you. We're speaking now about gender equality, and that's my field of work at Zijkant. But I have another question for you concerning equal pay. What about LGBTQI plus community and equal pay?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good remark, Vera, because we often receive in practice, because of course, if you have a type of regression analysis, because you start really from a statistical analysis, you can detect indeed those outliers. And then often the question is asked, can we also apply it to discover potential discrimination based, for instance, on sex or other grounds like than gender, based on disabilities, etc. And of course, there we should always be honest that we can only work with the data that a company can record. But if it can be recorded, typically we can apply the same methodologies. And of course, if certain companies open to improve those biases, and we constated some bias, the bias can also play here a role to have other gaps other than gender, of course. So I think it's important, but typically with the certification itself, it's still at this stage really the focus on the gender, but could be a starting point, of course, to overcome other types of discrimination or potential discriminations.
Okay. Okay, that was really an enriching discussion. So I'm really happy, glad that you are both around this table, and I would like to thank you both for your feedback on the topic. Before we close our podcast, do you would like to add something as a final note?
Yes, Maxime. Thank you for your interview, but I would like to emphasize that companies play a big, but really a huge role in closing the gender pay gap, and it's really important to do it, because if we look further, this leads to a big pension gap, which is really very significant. And you must know that the average gender pay gap in pensions in Europe is no less than 30.1%. So that's huge for elder women. So I would say, let's close the gap together and then make the world a better place to live for all of us.
Yes, Vera, that's nice. Okay, so we are now at the end of our podcast, and I really would like to thank you, Vera and Bart. You really inspired me today, and I hope it will inspire also the people who are listening to our podcast. Have a great day. Thank you very much. Bye.